The night was silent until a deafening blast shattered the darkness, leaving a trail of fire and smoke rising like a ghostly signal above the town. Rachel Morgan said, "Dear God, it's happening again." Sirens screamed in the distance as neighbors stumbled out of their homes, faces pale, eyes wide with disbelief at the glowing inferno. Detective James Carter arrived, his boots crunching broken glass, whispering, "This wasn't an accident." The air smelled of charred wood, twisted metal, and something far more sinister, a hidden truth clawing its way to the surface. Flames licked the sky, flickering orange and red like the heartbeat of chaos. Shadows danced across the wreckage, and James muttered, "Someone wanted this message carved into the night." Rachel clutched her chest, shaking as she whispered, "He promised me secrets would never stay buried." The crackle of burning timbers was punctuated by a sudden collapse, forcing everyone back. James' jaw tightened. "No one walks away from this untouched," he growled. The crowd whispered rumors like wildfire as investigators cordoned off the smoking ruins. James Carter said, "This place hides answers, not just ashes." Rachel, shaking, murmured, "He told me once secrets don't stay buried." The heat still radiated from broken bricks, twisted steel glowing faintly like veins of molten memory. A firefighter dragged a scorched beam away, revealing something etched into the wall. A strange symbol charred black, pulsing with eerie familiarity. Rachel gasped, "That mark, I've seen it before." James tightened his grip on his notepad, eyes narrowing. "Then this isn't random. Someone left a signature." The sound of camera shutters punctuated the tension, as crime scene photographers captured every detail. The night pressed heavy, carrying the scent of gasoline. The inferno's echo lingered, a reminder that what was destroyed was only the surface of something deeper. James crouched near the strange burned symbol, tracing the blackened mark with gloved fingers. "This isn't random fire damage," he muttered. Rachel stepped back, voice trembling. "I saw it carved into his desk years ago." The revelation struck like lightning. James' eyes narrowed. "Whose desk?" Rachel's voice cracked. "My father's," before he vanished. The silence was thick, broken only by the hiss of cooling embers. James exhaled sharply. "Then this explosion isn't the beginning. It's the continuation of something long buried." Rachel's hands trembled, her breath unsteady, as she whispered, "He promised me he'd keep us safe." A nearby officer turned sharply, overhearing. James stood slowly, shoulders heavy with grim realization. This wasn't destruction, it was a message, and it was meant for you. The neighborhood buzzed with speculation, phones recording the wreckage, rumors spreading faster than the smoke. Rachel whispered, "They'll all think I'm cursed." James shook his head. "No, they'll think someone wants you to be afraid." The wind shifted, carrying ashes like ghostly snowflakes, clinging to clothes and skin. A reporter shoved through the crowd, microphone raised, her voice sharp. "Detective, is this Arson?" James stared at her coldly, answering only with silence. Rachel's eyes welled, haunted by the sight of children staring at her as if she were Mark. James put a hand on her shoulder, firm, steady. "Fear feeds them, don't give it." She nodded weakly, though her heart thundered in her chest. Later, as fire crews subdued the last embers, James lingered at the edge of the wreckage, silent, lost in thought. His phone buzzed with a message. "You're digging too deep." He stared, jaw tightening. Rachel, seeing his expression, asked, "What is it?" He slid the phone into his pocket, muttering, "A warning." She looked away, whispering, "Then they already know we're here." The night felt heavier now, oppressive, like unseen eyes watched from the shadows. The fire had stolen one building, but what it truly consumed was safety. James exhaled slowly, whispering to himself, "This is only the beginning." The sun rose slowly over the smoldering ruins, but daylight brought no comfort, only harsh truth laid bare. Rachel Morgan sat on the hood of an abandoned car, her face hollow, hair tangled, eyes fixed on the wreckage like it might whisper answers. She said, "I used to dream of fire, But I never thought it would find me like this. Detective James Carter stood near her, silent, his trench coat weighed down by smoke and sleepless hours. He muttered, "This fire wasn't meant to kill, it was meant to speak." Rachel's hand trembled as she traced the locket against her chest. "My father said one day the past would burn its way back." James turned, his gaze steady but darkened by his own ghosts. "The past isn't just burning, Rachel. It's hunting you." The early morning breeze carried ash across the street, tiny embers glowing like dying stars. Rachel whispered, "Then it's never going to stop, is it?" James clenched his jaw, offering no answer. Inside the temporary command post, maps were pinned to walls, red strings marking connections no one wanted to admit existed. James leaned over the table, voice sharp. "We're not chasing shadows, we're unraveling something older than this fire." Rachel stood beside him, still shaking, whispering, "That symbol. It was carved into my father's study desk." James' eyes locked on her. "If your father left this behind, then he wasn't just a victim, he was part of it." Rachel recoiled, shaking her head, voice breaking. "No, he tried to protect me." James didn't flinch. "Maybe, but protection leaves traces. Secrets have a way of burning through lies." The room was filled with the low hum of radios and the scratch of pens, investigators piecing together fragments of chaos. Rachel's chest rose sharply as she said, "Then I need to know why my family's ashes are written into this story." The morgue was cold, sterile, humming with fluorescent lights. Rachel wrapped her arms around herself as James approached the coroner. "Show us what you found," James demanded. A white sheet peeled back, revealed scorched fragments of metal, etched with the same haunting symbol. Rachel gasped, her knees weakening. "It's him," she whispered. The coroner, a weary man with hollow eyes, said, "This wasn't debris. It was placed deliberately, almost like an offering." James' face hardened, jaw clenched. A message sent through fire. Rachel touched the edge of the metal, her voice breaking. "My father knew this symbol. He said it marked promises, ones that should never be broken." Silence filled the sterile room, heavy with dread. James muttered, "Then whoever placed this wants us to believe promises were broken." Rachel's tears blurred her vision, but her voice was steady. "Then we'll find out who broke them." Later, Rachel sat alone in her car parked outside her childhood home, its windows boarded, lawn overgrown, a relic of abandonment. Her reflection stared back from the glass, eyes sunken. She whispered, "You left me here, Father, with nothing but ashes." James opened the passenger door, sliding in silently, his presence steady. "This house holds answers," he said, scanning the walls peeling with neglect. Rachel's hand rested on the steering wheel, knuckles white. "I can't walk in there," she admitted, voice cracking. James replied, "Then we go together." The silence between them was thick, broken only by the creak of the house settling. Rachel swallowed hard, finally nodding. "If the past is waiting inside, I'll face it." James nodded once, eyes unwavering. "You won't face it alone." The house groaned with age as Rachel stepped inside, dust swirling in pale beams of fading sunlight. She whispered, "It still smells like him." Her hand brushed across the mantel, finding an old photograph half buried in dust, her father smiling, standing beside men she didn't recognize. James studied the photo, his voice low. "These men, they're not strangers to this case." Rachel's heart pounded as her gaze lingered on the symbol faintly carved into the wooden frame. "He was trying to tell me," she said. James frowned. "He left breadcrumbs, Rachel, knowing one day you'd return." Her voice trembled. "And now, someone wants me to follow them into the fire." The house creaked again, almost like it was listening, as Rachel's grip on the photo tightened. Dust moaned from the floorboards, as Rachel Morgan pried a loose panel beneath her father's desk, hands shaking. James Carter said slow, "Let it speak before we touch it." A hidden compartment blinked back, lined with oilcloth and rot. Rachel whispered, "He hid things where the house could keep them warm." She lifted a ledger bound in cracked green leather, and a tin of film reels. James said, ledger first, films later, before the elements take them. The first page wore the burned symbol like a seal, pressed into wax, black as ash. Rachel traced it, flinching. The cinder mark, she said. He warned me to forget it. Names marched in neat columns with dates and amounts that smelled like bribes. James muttered, payments not wages, and these initials repeat with sick rhythm. A final entry circled in red Whitman, and the date matched last week. Rachel said, Chief Harold Whitman was at our table once, smiling. James closed the book like a verdict and said, then the fire is a conversation, and he talks loud. Wind knifed across the abandoned quarry as Rachel met the man who refused to text a name. Evan Blake said, I worked with your father when the trucks ran at night. James Carter kept his distance, eyes scanning the rim. Rachel asked, what did he fear more, fire or the people who own it? Evan's jaw clenched. He called it the cinder mark, a circle that buys silence with accelerants. He showed a scar on his wrist like a brand. James said, names Evan, or we keep guessing while someone lights another fuse. Evan stepped closer, voice low. Graham Pike paid for storage, and Chief Whitman made the paperwork clean. Rachel swallowed hard. My father wrote Whitman in red. Evan nodded. Red meant debt due. A gust lifted grit into their eyes, as sirens murmured far away. James said, if Pike moves product he has a depot. Evan pointed to rusted hangars. He does, and he never sleeps. Night rain turned the highway into a ribbon of obsidian, as headlights ghosted their rear view. Rachel said that sedan has followed us since the quarry. James Carter eased the wheel and killed the cabin light. Hold steady and watch the lanes, he said. The tail car inched closer, wipers slashing rhythm. Rachel's phone buzzed with the same number that warned James. She said, they know every turn we make. James growled. Then we give them one they don't expect. He braked hard to slip behind a semi, vanishing in spray. The sedan surged past, confused, then swerved back too late. Rachel exhaled, shaking. There's a leak, James, inside the badge or inside my name. He nodded, eyes on mirrors. Both smell like gasoline. Rain hammered the roof like a countdown. Rachel whispered, if Whitman's in red, who holds the match? James said, Pike sells the flame, but someone richer buys the spark. Chief Harold Whitman's office smelled like old leather and new power as files towered like walls. Whitman said, you're a step from insubordination, Carter. James Carter stood firm. I'm a step from the truth, sir. Rachel Morgan held the ledger to her chest and said, your name is circled in red. Whitman smiled without warmth. Your father owed debts he could not pay. James said, debts don't explode on their own. Whitman leaned forward. You both need rest and counsel. He slid a form across the desk. Recuse or be removed. Rachel's voice broke. Did you sign the fires, Chief? Whitman's eyes cooled. I signed budgets, not gasoline. James didn't touch the form. We'll find the depot, then the fuse, then the hand. Whitman's jaw worked. Then you'll find yourself unemployed. Rachel whispered, threats are louder when someone hides. The motel hummed with old air and new fear as maps covered the wall like a rash. James Carter pinned receipts from the ledger beside shipping records. Evan sent. Rachel said, Pike uses the Kane Street depot, midnight transfers on even days. James traced a route from the depot to municipal lines. Explosives near gas mains amplify noise and erase evidence, he said. Rachel touched her locket. Steady now. My father filmed meetings because paper burns, she said. James loaded a reel into a dusty projector and killed the lamp. On screen, Whitman shook hands with Graham Pike beside crates, stamped with hazmat codes. Rachel whispered, he wasn't protecting me, he was preparing me. The film jittered and froze on a smiling seal. James said, this is our warrant. And our clock. A car door slammed outside, close and fast. Rachel met his eyes. Then we move before midnight, or someone writes us in red. The Kane Street depot loomed like a rusted beast in the fog, its corrugated skin sweating from cold night mist. James Carter said, "If Pike runs the fires, this place is his altar." Rachel Morgan pulled her jacket tight, locket clinking, whispering, "It feels like he's waiting for us." A single floodlight buzzed above, carving hard shadows across stacked crates marked with hazmat warnings. James crouched, scanning the locks. They want secrecy, but left arrogance painted on every wall. Rachel's voice trembled. "My father filmed here. This exact door." Her fingers grazed rusted steel, her breath sharp. James muttered, "Then this isn't a hunt. It's a reenactment." Suddenly, from the shadows, a man's voice sliced through the air. Graham Pike said, "Your father was one of us, Rachel, before he chose betrayal." Rachel froze, her heart hammering. "That's a lie," she spat. Pike stepped into the light, grin cold, hands raised mockingly. "No," he said, "it's the only truth he left behind." Rachel's chest heaved as Pike's words struck like a blade. "You're lying," she said, voice brittle but sharp. Pike laughed, slow and heavy. "Your father wore the mark long before you were born. He paid his debts in silence." James Carter drew closer, jaw clenched. "Why the explosions, Pike? Why burn the past?" Pike's grin widened. "Because ash hides sins better than stone, and Whitman wanted no witnesses left." Rachel gasped. "Whitman. He promised protection." Pike leaned closer, his voice a hiss. "Protection is only another form of ownership." James' eyes narrowed, hand near his holster. "And ownership breeds rebellion." Pike smirked, tapping his chest. "Your father tried rebellion. Now his daughter repeats his mistake." Rachel's voice cracked. "He didn't betray you. He betrayed himself to protect me." Pike shook his head, smirk fading. "No, girl, he betrayed us all, and the fire answered him." James Carter said, "You're shielding Whitman, Pike, but your face shows cracks." Pike chuckled darkly. "Shield? He built the matchbox, detective. I just struck the flame." Rachel's voice shook. "My father warned me never to trust him. Whitman smiled like family, but he lied like fire." Pike snapped. "He was our architect, girl. Every blast, every bribe, every debt tied to his name." James stepped closer, fury sharp in his eyes. "Then Whitman wears the crown, and you bow." Pike smirked. "Bow? No. We partnered. But your father broke covenant, and so his house burned." Rachel's tears blurred her sight, but her voice rose strong. "You killed him." Pike's grin faltered, silence thick. James said, "Truth burns brighter than your gasoline, Pike." Pike whispered, "I didn't kill him." Rachel's stomach dropped as Pike leaned close. "Your father lit the fire himself to keep you alive." Rachel staggered back, words choking her. "No, he wouldn't." Pike's eyes gleamed with cruel certainty. "He chose fire over a bullet, Rachel. He gave himself to the ash to keep them from taking you." James Carter said, "He set the blaze to bury the mark." Rachel's voice cracked. "He made me carry lies instead of memories." Pike stepped closer, low voice curling like smoke. "And now you inherit his debt. You were always meant to." James barked, "That's enough." He drew his gun, steel glinting. Pike raised his hands, smirking. "Shoot me and the truth still stands. Whitman built this. Your father paid it. You will finish it." Rachel whispered, "I won't." The sound of boots echoed in the distance. Whitman's voice carried, smooth as oil. "No one finishes anything without me." Rachel froze as her world snapped into new terror. Whitman stepped into the depot, rain dripping from his coat, eyes hard. "Detective Carter, you dig graves, not cases." James Carter held steady, gun unwavering. "And you bury people in them, Chief." Rachel's voice broke. "You worked with my father, promised him safety." Whitman sneered. "Safety is the currency of fools." He traded loyalty for love of a daughter, and debts don't forgive. Pike chuckled bitterly. So she knows now. Whitman's voice boomed. She knows nothing. Her father started the fire to erase himself, not us. Rachel's tears fell as she shouted, "Lies, he protected me." Whitman leaned close, whispering like poison. He protected his own shame. You are the legacy of betrayal. James growled, "Truth cuts deeper than your politics." Whitman's eyes narrowed. Then bleed with him. Outside, thunder cracked, as if the night itself bore witness. Thunder rattled the depot rafters as rain hissed through cracked panes and pooled around stacked crates. Chief Harold Whitman said, "Lower the gun, Carter, or everyone drowns in fire." James Carter kept his aim steady and replied, "You built this furnace." Graham Pike lifted a black remote, its red lead winking like a pulse. Rachel Morgan stepped forward, voice shaking. "My father died to end your circle." Whitman smiled thinly and said, "He died to hide it." James edged right, gauging distance and cover, boots silent on wet concrete. Pike said, "Midnight is 1 minute closer," and tapped the remote with a lazy finger. Rachel raised her phone and said, "I'm recording. And this stream is live." Whitman's jaw tightened as sirens echoed far off like approaching thunder. James said, "End it now, or face it forever." Pike laughed, but his eyes flicked toward a junction box stenciled gas main. Rachel whispered, "Then we cut the fuse before the clock decides for us." Rachel sprinted for the junction box, fingers slick with rain, heart counting down the missing minutes. James Carter said, "Rachel, on my mark," and shifted his sight to Pike's wrist. Whitman moved left and said, "Touch that panel and this city sings." Rachel yanked the cover and found a nest of taped leads humming like nerves. Pike smirked and said, "Touch the wrong vein and she bleeds." James fired a warning shot that cracked a hanging chain and jolted Pike backward. Rachel breathed, blue to blue, black to ground, "Stay alive," and pulled the first clip. Sparks flared like angry fireflies, then dimmed to a frightened glow. Whitman barked, "You have no idea what line you're crossing." James said, "Every line you drew was gasoline." Rachel pulled the second clip, jaw tight, eyes fierce. The remote's lead flickered uncertainly, and the depot seemed to inhale. Pike bolted up the catwalk, boots clanging, remote clenched, rain mist turning the air to glass. James Carter said, "I've got him," and charged the metal stairs 2 at a time. Whitman cut across the floor and said, "Bring the girl," voice flat as a stamp. Rachel Morgan grabbed a pry bar and answered, "Try it," breath hot in the cold air. The catwalk swayed as James reached Pike and slammed him into a rail with a hard shoulder. Pike hissed, "You won't stop a covenant with muscle," and drove an elbow. James absorbed the hit and said, "Confessions travel faster than fire," and locked the wrist. Below, Whitman reached for Rachel's phone and found the stream timer blinking. Rachel swung the bar low and said, "Not yours to edit," knocking his hand aside. Pike twisted, nearly free, and spat, "Press the button and be legend." James snarled, "Be arrested," and wrenched the remote loose. Rachel lifted the phone toward Whitman, the live feed painting his face with a cold square of truth. Chief Harold Whitman said, "Turn it off," voice smooth but fraying at the edges. James Carter shouted from above, "The remote is clear," and pocketed it without breaking stance. Whitman tried a smile and said, "The city needs order, not purity." Rachel said, "It needed you to choose people over power." Pike snarled, "He chose both," struggling under James' grip. Rachel tapped a clip and her father's filmed voice filled the depot, weary and clear. Her father said, "If they hear this, I failed to bury it," and named Whitman and Pike. Whitman froze between denial and camera light, breath shallow. James said, "Say nothing or say everything. The stream owns you now." Whitman exhaled and whispered, "I built the fire breaks, not the flames." Rachel answered, "You lit them with signatures," and the feed kept listening. The depot moaned as pressure settled, wires limp, the red lead dead like a dried ember. James Carter cuffed Graham Pike and said, "Your legend ends in paperwork." Pike laughed low and said, "Legends smolder in courts, detective." Rachel Morgan stepped toward Whitman, voice steady now. "My father wanted the circle to end with him," she said, "but I will end it with truth." Chief Harold Whitman stared at the floor and said, "Truth does not pay for roads." James replied, "It pays for lives not burned for them." Sirens clawed closer, bright wash strobing through the skylights. Rachel lifted her phone and said, "The city heard you tonight." Whitman finally raised his hands, shoulders sinking under the storm. "James," said Chief Harold Whitman, "you're under arrest," each word heavy and clean. Rachel closed her eyes and whispered, "Dad, the fire stops here." Rain tapered into mist as flashing sirens painted the depot in fractured red and blue. Officers swarmed like shadows reclaiming ground, handcuffing Pike and escorting Whitman into the flood of lights. James Carter said, "The fire's voice is out, but its echo will stay." Rachel Morgan stood beneath the dripping rafters, locket tight in her fist, whispering, "Dad, I carried your silence until tonight." James approached, his eyes weary but steady. "Your silence broke the circle," he said, his voice softened with weight. Rachel lifted her chin, tears threading with rain, and replied, "He wasn't a traitor. He was a man too afraid to watch me burn." James nodded, looking at her with solemn resolve. "And you turned fear into proof." The depot creaked under the pressure of memory, but the storm outside eased, carrying away smoke. Rachel closed her eyes and said, "Then maybe I can breathe again." At dawn, Rachel sat on the steps outside the precinct, her clothes still damp, watching the sun bleed through city haze. She whispered, "Morning shouldn't feel this heavy." James Carter walked out, carrying 2 steaming coffees. His trench coat wrinkled, exhaustion stitched into his face. He handed her one and said, "Weight doesn't vanish with arrests. It lingers like smoke." Rachel accepted, both hands trembling around the paper cup. "He left me with fire," she said, "but tonight I gave it air." James nodded. "Air turns fire to ash. Ash can't hurt you unless you keep feeding it." Rachel's eyes searched the skyline, lips pressed tight. He wanted to end it, but he couldn't. James took a slow sip. "You did." The silence stretched, not empty but full, the kind that rests heavy on hearts that survived. Rachel exhaled, eyes closing, and whispered, "Maybe I can start living with that." Inside the evidence room, shelves hummed with forgotten stories locked in boxes. Rachel traced the spine of her father's ledger, its cracked leather under police seals. She said, "This book killed him and saved me." James Carter stood beside her, voice low. "It gave you proof, not chains." Rachel nodded faintly, her eyes wet. He circled Whitman in red because he knew the color would burn brighter than the ink. James studied the shelves, lined with artifacts of crimes past. "Justice is slow," he said, "but it doesn't forget ink, not if you shout it loud enough." Rachel's fingers lingered one last time on the book before stepping back. "He spoke through ashes," she said, "but I'll speak through truth." James gave a small nod, hands in pockets, steady. "That's the kind of fire that leaves no scars." The evidence room lights buzzed softly, sterile but strangely comforting, like a clean breath after smoke. Later, Rachel returned to her childhood home, its boarded windows still casting shadows of memory. She stood in the doorway, locket glinting faintly in dusk light, whispering, "I'm not afraid to open this anymore." James Carter stood on the porch behind her, silent but grounding. Rachel pushed the door, hinges creaking like old wounds. Inside, dust swirled, the air faintly scented of char and wood. She walked to the mantel where the faded photo of her father still rested, her fingers brushing its cracked frame. "You were broken, Dad," she said softly, "but you still left me a path." James said, "A path isn't defined by who built it, but who walks it." Rachel nodded, tears gathering but steady. "Then I'll walk it forward." For the first time, she set the locket down on the mantel beside the photo. "You don't have to protect me anymore," she whispered. Night settled over the city. As Rachel walked a quiet street alone, neon signs flickering faintly in puddles. She said, "Every flame leaves a scar, but scars can remind you to heal." Her steps slowed at a cafe window where laughter spilled into the night. She pressed a hand to the glass, watching families safe inside, her reflection superimposed over their warmth. James Carter's voice echoed in her mind. "Ashes can't hurt unless you keep feeding them." Rachel smiled faintly, the first in days. She whispered, "Then I'll feed myself light instead." The locket was gone from her neck, left in memory's keeping. Only her breath fogged the window before fading into night. A car passed, headlights sweeping, but she didn't flinch. Rachel turned, walking into the glow of a street lamp, her silhouette steady against the dark. The storm was over, but the story still breathed within her. The courthouse steps gleamed wet beneath gray morning light, as reporters swarmed like restless crows. Chief Harold Whitman shuffled in cuffs, head lowered, his sharp suit wilted. James Carter walked beside the escorting officers, eyes fixed forward, his face carved from sleepless nights. Rachel Morgan stood across the street, arms folded, breath misting in cold air. She whispered, "The fire found its judge." Cameras flashed, each burst like a miniature explosion, freezing Whitman's face in shame. Rachel clutched her coat tighter, eyes burning but dry. James glanced her way briefly, nodding once with solemn affirmation. Rachel said, "He thought power would silence us, but truth speaks louder than smoke." The courthouse doors yawned wide, swallowing Whitman into their stone throat. Rachel's chest eased, as though the circle finally closed. Yet she knew scars remained etched beneath her skin. In the quiet of an empty cafe, Rachel sat at a corner table, the morning sun painting long golden lines across scarred wood. She held her father's ledger one final time before sliding it into an evidence envelope. "You've spoken enough," she whispered, closing the flap. A waitress poured coffee gently, unaware of the weight in the moment. James Carter entered, trenchcoat still damp from rain, and sat opposite her. "You don't have to keep carrying him," he said softly. Rachel shook her head. "I'm not. I'm letting him rest." James studied her carefully, then said, "And what about you?" Rachel paused, fingers circling the warm cup. "I'll start writing a story that doesn't begin in ashes." The cafe clock ticked, steady, almost kind. James smiled faintly and said, "That's how you win." Rachel visited the cemetery, where her father's headstone stood plain and unadorned, its edges damp from morning dew. She knelt, fingers brushing the carved letters. "I hated you for silence," she whispered, "but tonight I gave it voice." James Carter lingered at a distance, hands in pockets, leaving her the space of grief. Rachel set a small white flower on the stone and said, "You weren't the man I needed, but you were still my father." The breeze shifted, carrying birdsong that pierced the silence. Rachel closed her eyes, her tears falling quietly onto the earth. She whispered, "Rest now, because I finally can." James looked skyward, exhaling heavy, then said, "He left a wound, but you closed it." Rachel rose slowly, her posture steadier than when she arrived. The headstone gleamed under sunlight, no longer just a shadow of loss. That evening, Rachel walked the waterfront where flames had once stained the sky, but now only ripples caught the setting sun. The city breathed differently, lighter, though scars still clung to its edges. Rachel leaned on the railing, hair lifting in cool wind. "The fire didn't take me," she whispered. "It remade me." James Carter joined her, resting his hands on the rail, eyes tracing the horizon. "You found truth," he said. "Not many survive it." Rachel smiled faintly. "Truth doesn't heal everything, but it stops the bleeding." Boats drifted across the water, their lights glowing like fragile stars. James looked at her with a rare softness and said, "Your father tried to shield you. You chose to stand." Rachel nodded, voice quiet but firm. "And I'll keep standing." The last light bled across the water, fading into night. The final night was silent, the city wrapped in darkness broken only by a single street lamp. Rachel walked alone, her shadow long across the cracked pavement. She whispered, "Every fire leaves an echo, but echoes fade." Her steps were steady, her gaze forward, no locket around her neck, just the calm weight of choice. A siren wailed far away, but passed without stopping. Rachel paused beneath the street lamp, looking up as moths circled its glow. She whispered, "I'm still here." The wind swept gently, carrying the faintest scent of smoke, but this time she didn't flinch. Instead, she closed her eyes and breathed deep, her lips curling into a small, resolute smile. The screen faded to black as the echo of her footsteps lingered, then silence.